Hi everybody, Andrew Cuneo here with another Alchemy deck tech. This is my second attempt at a control deck since they've nerfed Leer and Hullbreaker Horror in Alchemy. The first attempt was blue-white. I didn't make a video on it because it wasn't very successful. I was having a lot of problems beating the werewolf decks. So I decided to look into playing Grixis because I just wanted to have the best creature removal I could possibly have in a control deck. And I think that Grixis gives you that. The other thing that is interesting about this deck is it hasn't been clear to me, well, at least until this deck, what's the right way to try to win the game in a Key to the Archive control deck. Do you want to try to use Hullbreaker Horror? Do you want to still try to use Leer? Do you want to go a different direction? So this deck is going a different direction. I'm just trying to win with Magma Opus and Witness the Future. And so far that's felt pretty good. I guess we should just go ahead and go over the various decisions that I've made in putting this deck together. So, like I said, it's a Key to the Archive deck. I still think Key to the Archive is a very strong card, even though the nerf to Leer definitely does make it worse, just because it worked so well with Leer previously. And in a control deck, the fact that Key ramps you 2 mana is really interesting because it makes a card like Magma Opus a lot more appealing. This deck is not like one of the historic decks that play Magma Opus where you're planning to get it in the graveyard and then cast it for a reduced cost in some way out of your graveyard. You know, with Mizzix's Mastery or Torrential Gearhulk, something like that. This deck, you're mostly planning to just spend 8 mana to play Magma Opus. The discarding it to make a treasure can be good on the second turn if you're using it to, say, put a Key to the Archive into play on the third turn. That's going to be worth doing a lot of the time, I would say. Or if you're just doing it so you get to discover the formula a turn earlier, that's also probably going to be worth doing it most of the time. So the discard to make a treasure is not the main part of the card in this deck like it is in a lot of historic decks. This is much more, you're planning to cast it for 8 mana. That's going to be your normal play. Every once in a while it'll be in your opening hand and you want to make a treasure. So 3 Magma Opuses to finish your opponent really isn't enough to reliably end a game. So there are 2 Witness the Futures that allow you to, recycle any spells you've found that were valuable in the course of the game thus far. So that's going to be Discover the Formula, Magma Opus, whatever removal spells or counters are appropriate against your opponent's deck. So that's kind of the core engine of the deck is, stall, play Magma Opuses and discover the formulas, recur them with Witness the Future. I've got 2 sweepers in my main deck, 1 Burn Down the House, which is another card you can recur that can end the game just by making Devils. 1 Meathook Massacre. Compared to my previous builds of Esper, I'm no longer as excited to play with Meathook Massacre because I'm no longer playing with Divide by 0. So you no longer have the line of bounce your Meathook Massacre back to your hand and replay it. Basically, it's just the first Meathook Massacre I play is just going to sit and play for the rest of the game. So I am going to continue to get the life gain from killing my opponent's creatures, but it's just not as good of a card as Meathook Massacre used to be in Esper. That's why there's only 1 copy in the main deck. Also, the kind of Sanguine Brushstroke, Blood Artist, Drain decks are way less popular now. So trying to fight against that draining effect is no longer as necessary. It's mostly now just efficient creatures that you want to be able to kill efficiently, I would say. So let's look at the removal spells. I've got 1 Bloodchief's Thirst. I do like having 1 spell that I can cast for 1 mana in a deck that's going to have a lot of lands that come into play tapped potentially on the second turn. This is something that even if I'm on the draw and my second land has to come into play tapped, I can still play this for 1 mana. Also, I've got the Celestus in my deck, so on turn 3, I can play the Celestus and play this for 1 mana. If I thought this was a better card, I'd be playing more copies of it. It's just, it's kind of awkward that so much of the power in the creatures people are playing with now is at 3 and 4 mana, because this is just not an efficient way to kill a 3 or 4 mana creature. So I don't think you want to play more copies of this. Other removal spells, I've got a mix of Infernal Grasp, Parasitic Grasp, Abrade. So this is kind of typical of a control deck where you want to have a diversity of answers, and then you want to, based on what you figure out about your opponent's deck, you want to try to get your answers to line up as best they can against your opponent's threats. So obviously Parasitic Grasp is great if you're playing against someone who's playing humans or werewolves, because you're going to get to play it for 2 mana. And the gaining 3 life matters a lot. This deck does not have a ton of incidental life gaining in it. So being able to gain 3 life, that goes a long way. Infernal Grasp is to be able to kill bigger creatures like Townraiser Tyrant, maybe a Hall of Storm Giants, a Lupine Harbinger, something like that. Then Abrade gives you a card that is both a creature removal spell, but can also hit Key to the Archive if you happen to be in a Key to the Archive mirror. And so by having a mix of these, it's going to make sideboarding a lot easier, because you're going to have fewer cards that have to come out in any given matchup. For Expressive Iterations, that's kind of one of the huge payoffs for being blue-red. Expressive Iteration is definitely one of the best card advantage cards in Standard, Historic, Alchemy. Like, basically, you name it, whatever the format on Arena is, Expressive Iteration is one of the best card advantage cards. So I'm happy to be playing the colors that can play it again. I've got 2 Shatterskull Smashings in my deck, and I don't have any Jwari Disruptions. And so there's a couple reasons I did that. One is that now that I'm playing with red, I do think Shatterskull Smashing is a great card, and it specifically takes advantage of the fact that this is a control deck that ramps. So you can conceivably, play a Shatterskull Smashing for X's 4 or more pretty early on in the game. You're going to get to X's 6 in a lot of games. If you play a Key to the Archive on turn 4, you're not there yet, but you're well on your way to getting this all the way up to 6. The other thing about Jwari Disruption was I wanted to make my deck better against the aggressive creature decks, and part of that is making it so that you have more hands where you're able to cast a removal spell on turn 2, and a lot of that means just not having your lands come into play tapped on turn 2. Having a tapped land on turn 1 is fine. You don't have a lot of stuff to do on turn 1, but you want to start playing removal spells on turn 2. And Jwari Disruption was just always a land that came into play tapped. So that's why I've switched to Shatterskull Smashings. Also, this deck just isn't as blue focused as other decks are. So having fewer blue lands is nice. It makes it easier to balance the mana out, because I do have 2 Hall of Storm Giants. I think that's the best creature land for this style of deck. So I didn't want to have Hall of Storm Giants and have Jwari Disruption. That would be just too many lands that only produce blue mana. Moving on to the 3-drops, we've got some copies of the Celestus, 2 copies. And this is just another mana ramp thing. It also adds a little bit more life gain to the deck. Also, when you play a deck that has this much 1-for-1 removal in it, you are at risk of just getting flooded, especially if you're in a matchup where your removal spells aren't useful. So having this looting ability to kind of get through some of the bad cards in your deck is nice. Also, just looting in this deck is generally good, because Witness the Future gets more powerful the further you've gotten into your deck. The recurring ability becomes better the bigger, you want adding 4 cards to your deck to be affecting the largest percentage of your deck possible. Like, ideally, you would have no library, you'd be playing Witness the Future, you'd be getting your other Witness the Future and 3 great spells back. But, even if you're down to 15 or 20 cards, you can see that the impact of the Witness the Future is going to be higher relative to the size of your deck. So in a lot of decks, when you play the Celestus, if you're empty-handed, you probably don't want to loot, or you might not want to loot. There has to be some reason to just put a card into your graveyard. In this deck, you definitely want to loot if you're planning to set up a Witness the Future loop, because you just want the size of your deck to be smaller. So that's a real minor thing. Mostly this is in the deck for color fixing, life gain, and the lootability. I mean, all the parts of this card matter for sure. Then we've got some more removal, 2 Brittle Blast. Brittle Blast is a really, really great removal spell, I would say. The fact that it 5 damage to a creature or planeswalker kills almost everything you're likely to play against. And the exile ability matters. So this is just this is a very strong card. I've got 1 Soul Shatter to have a little bit of variety in my 3 mana removal. So Soul Shatter is going to be better if you're trying to kill something like a Hall of Storm Giants, a Hullbreaker Horror, a Graveyard Trespasser. Those are probably the main places where it's going to perform better than Brittle Blast. That's why I've got a mix. Because again, you want a diversity of removal usually in a control deck. Then I've got 3 copies of Saw It Coming. I've been kind of impressed by playing hard counters in Alchemy since Divide by Zero has gotten nerfed. A lot of people's their decks are not set up in a way where they're used to playing against hard counters. So just having a small amount of hard counters is pretty nice, because a lot of people are just planning to, tap out on turn 4 or tap out on turn 5, tap out on turn 6, and just play some big threat, not expecting you to just be able to counter it. So I'm pretty happy to play Saw It Coming. I think Saw It Coming is the best of the 3 mana counters that you can play. I wasn't that impressed by Disdainful Stroke or Negate in the main deck, because I think there's so many werewolf decks that are focused on 2 and 3 mana plays. So I didn't really like the 2 mana counter options. If Essence Scatter was in the format, I would probably be playing that. At 3 mana, there's also this card, Abolish Energy, which I haven't even crafted yet. But I have thought about playing with it a lot. Why can't I see it? Maybe it's Absorb Energy? Energy. It has something to do with energy. Okay, Absorb Energy. So this counter looks really appealing. The problem with it is I don't have any creatures in my deck. And I think most people's decks are mostly creatures. So I'm not actually going to be able to get the mana reduction to work unless I'm playing like a mirror match. And I think that's not good enough. And especially as a sideboard card, when we get to the sideboard, you're going to see I've got some copies of Test of Talents. I think as a sideboard card for playing Key to the Archive mirrors, Test of Talents or Disdainful Stroke is just going to perform better than Absorb Energy. So that's why I don't have any copies of Absorb Energy in my deck. Also, the fact that Saw It Coming, you can foretell it and then play it only for a single blue makes your mana work a little bit easier. Finishing off the main deck with the lands. The mana base is pretty similar to the Esper deck that I was playing in the previous iteration of Alchemy. So we've got 4 of each of the good dual lands. Only 2 Forsaken Crossroads, because you want to minimize your comes into play tap lands. Also, the Forsaken Crossroads is a little bit awkward in a 3-colored deck, because you really want to have a lot of your lands that are able to produce either color of mana. Because you don't want to be in a spot where you have 5 lands in play, but they all only produce a single color of mana, because it's not necessarily going to be the right mix for you to play multiple spells a turn across different turns. So you want to play a double blue spell on turn 4, but then turn 5 you want to play a Parasitic Grasp that's going to cost double black because you have to cleave it, and you want to be able to play an Infernal Grasp. If you're only playing with Pathways and Forsaken Crossroads, that gets a lot harder to set up. But if you have some dual lands, so you've got, you're getting 2 different sources, 2 different colors from a land once it's in play, then you can set your Pathways or Forsaken Crossroads to cover whatever the gaps are. There's 1 basic swamp in this deck, which is basically a concession to the fact that there are a few decks that are playing a Field of Ruin. And you really don't want to have your mana base be such that somebody can Field of Ruin you on turn 3 and they're just getting to destroy your land and you don't get a land. Once you have one basic land in your deck, you're pretty immune to that. Every once in a while, you'll draw the swamp. If you do draw the swamp in that scenario, you want to delay playing it for as long as possible, because it's not very appealing from the opponent's perspective to just Field of Ruin you on turn 3 randomly, hoping that your one basic is in your hand, because they give up so much tempo, and the majority of the time it's not in your hand, and then they've given up a ton of tempo. If they know that the Field of Ruin is going to just destroy one of your lands and you're not going to be able to get a replacement, it makes a ton of sense for them to do. So I think having one basic in your deck, especially if you're playing in a tournament where it's public deck lists or open deck lists, which would be like the Set Championship or events on MTG Melee, you definitely want to have the one basic land in your deck, because it makes that turn 3 Field of Ruin play much, much worse for the opponent, or much harder to decide to do. Moving on to the sideboard. So this looks a lot like a lot of my control deck sideboards, where for blue mirrors, I've got a mix of Go Blanks, Malevolent Hermits, Duresses, and I have one Test of Talents. So just a variety. I like having some number of Duresses and Go Blanks so that you can force the action. And like I've said before, I think Malevolent Hermit is the best card you can play in your sideboard to actually have a card that is going to allow you to have an advantage early on in the game, as opposed to just a card that you're just going to hope to trade with one of your opponent's cards. The other thing about Malevolent Hermit is it's generally the best way to fight opposing Malevolent Hermits. A lot of the times, control mirrors are going to come down to the person who draws more Malevolent Hermits, by turn 4, if you've drawn one more Malevolent Hermit than your opponent, you're just going to be on the front foot, and it's going to be up to your opponent to find a way to make up the advantage that you're getting from just having an extra Malevolent Hermit. So that's kind of the 8 or 9 cards that you would board in a control mirror, because there's also a Memory Deluge. There's also one Imrith. I kind of like having one creature in my sideboard, because it makes it very hard for your opponent to have anti-creature cards against you post-board. And Imrith is pretty hard to kill, even if they do happen to have an anti-creature card, if you just play it and then don't attack with it right away. It's a very good blocker. So this is kind of a flexible card that's good in a lot of spots. I don't know that I would necessarily always board it in a blue control mirror. It would depend a lot on the exact configuration of my opponent's deck. There's also a Memory Deluge, which you would obviously board in, I think, in a controlling mirror. The Memory Deluge is mostly in the sideboard because I think it's an important card against the red-black decks, which red-black decks tend to have a lot of Go Blanks and whatever the other Mind Rot is called that you can kick. So you want to just have as many 2-for-1s as you possibly can against those red-black decks. And then I've got a couple more creature removal spells. I can go up to 4 Parasitic Grasps, additional Bloodchief's Thirst, which is basically if you play against a deck that has a lot of 2-drops, or as Thalia, something like that. And then 2 more sweepers, 1 Burn Down the House, 1 Meathook Massacre. I've said this in most of my control deck videos when I'm playing with black. I think Parasitic Grasp is just so good against so many of the creature decks that it's a mistake not to have 4 in your 75. Because if you play against White Weenie, if you play against pretty much any werewolf deck, Parasitic Grasp is just a great spell. And it's great at the spot on your curve where you're really looking for a great spell. It's really easy to find lots of 5-mana cards that are going to be great in creature matchups. But the question is, do you have a great spell on turn 2 or 3 that's going to get you to the point where you can play your 5-mana cards? And I think Parasitic Grasp is just the solution to that issue. So that is the deck. I've got a decent number of matches under my belt with it, and it's felt pretty good against most of the creature decks the red-black Mind Rot decks have been the hardest matchup, and that I have struggled with, so I have been tweaking my deck after each time I've lost to that, and this is the spot I've arrived at. Let's go and see if we can get some matches in. Hopefully I get to play against werewolf decks or that red-black sort of werewolf deck, so you can see this deck in the matchups I've mostly prepared for, but we'll just see what we get. I'm not going to mulligan this hand on the play. It might be tempting to mulligan on the draw because it is pretty slow. So in terms of land sequencing, there's not a lot of reason to think that I'm going to need blue mana on turn 2 now that I don't have Jwari Disruption in my deck. The only blue spell I have that you would play on turn 2 is Expressive Iteration, and really you don't want to play that on turn 2. So probably I'm up against mono green, given that they have a snow-covered forest. Oh, so I messed up. I definitely should have played a Stormcarved Coast on my second turn. I wasn't thinking about the fact that I could be drawing Saw It Coming. That was bad. Probably going to lose to an Old Growth Troll now. Although not if that is their best play. My hand is just so expensive. I think I just have to play the Key to the Archive. Wow, they have 2 colors. Okay. So it is different from what I was expecting. I think I'm going to have to take the hit from these creatures again and just go discover Saw It Coming, whatever they cast, and hope that I draw removal spells that can dig me out of this. What's the ultimate on this? Till end of turn, creatures you control get +3 and +3 and trample. So not much, honestly. I guess I messed up by not playing that on my turn. Not completely dead. If they take this Discover out of my hand, then I will have 2 fresh cards to work with. And if I just find a good removal spell, this is a tenable position. So I've got enough mana that I can kill this twice. I'm really down on cards at this point, so I'm going to need to draw Expressive Iteration or Magma Opus pretty quickly. There's also the issue of what have they been buffing up all of this time. Because part of the reason I'm still in this game is they played a 4-mana Planeswalker that I've been able to completely ignore this far. It's going to catch up to me, though, I'm sure. Yeah, it's caught up to me. Okay. You win, opponent. Well then. So I think I like Burn Down the House, given that they are playing with Planeswalkers. I definitely need my Soul Shatter against the Cragplate Behemoth. Question is, do I not want any of these other things? Maybe I'll trim a Saw It Coming. I don't really, their deck is obviously a little bit of an oddball deck. Against some builds of mono green, Parasitic Grasp is really strong if they have Werewolf Pack Leader and Grizzled Huntmaster. But we haven't really seen any indication that those cards are in my opponent's deck, so maybe I'll keep Abrade. Yeah, maybe I should have Imrith in my deck. Just a way to pressure their Planeswalkers. Also, they're a green-blue deck, so it's not like they're going to have creature removal. All right. Let's see if they have Drawer Disruption. They don't. It would be weird if for their deck to have Drawer Disruption in it. I wonder if this deck has Settle the Wilds in it. It has Cemetery Prowler in it. I think the main problem with this card, Cemetery Prowler, is it's just not a good card. It's night. It's day turns to night, or is it night turns to day? So I don't need a land. Feels like they're probably sitting on a Test of Talents. Could do nothing, or I could just play Expressive Iteration. Let's play Expressive Iteration. If they have a Test of Talents for it, it's fine. We're going to cast the key. I guess leave Shatterskull Smashing in my deck. Maybe I should have put the key in my over there and put the Blightstep Pathway in my hand. Then I could have cast the key and discarded the pathway, but had the coast in play. That might have been a little better. This card is good against Key to the Archive. This is not the first time I've had my Key to the Archive destroyed by a Sawblade Stinger. Oh, they've instead decided to destroy the Celestus. That might make sense. Got my answer to that Cragplate Baloth. I'm ready for you, opponent. I'm ready for that as well. Yes, I'm going to Soul Shatter this. I could just wait a turn and burn down the house, but it's probably playing a little bit too scared of the Baloth. Do I get punished? Sort of. I mean, it's definitely punishing that happened, but I can just play Burn Down the House and make Devils and chump that thing for quite a while. Discard Bloodchief's Thirst, I guess. This I forgot. This is the one that you can get the Goriak. This is the Garrick that provides the Goriak. They don't exile my Soul Shatter. I'll make this game more annoying. Exile to discover the formula. That's fine. Please tell me more about this formula. So I also still have a Meathook Massacre that can kill this Cragplate Baloth. 2 mana Key to the Archive. Seems good to me. Alright, let's just keep taking regrowths. I'm going to really discover the formula quite a lot this game, I would say. Alright. I was interested in chumping it already. Glad they don't have anything that gives their card trample yet. I can see the future, and there's a Soul Shatter, a Witness the Future, and a Discover the Formula in it. Guess I'll discard this Meathook Massacre. Was it extremely discounted? It was only discounted twice. Not that good of a deal. I didn't want to spend mana on anything else on my turn. I want to just have two counters up, and I probably can't lose. I could have another one of those Baloths. Oh, it is a Settle the Wilds deck. Cool. So they'd be settling up to 9. They could have the Tarrasque in their deck. That's fine. I'll let them get the Tarrasque. Magma Opus is way better when it costs 4 mana. Alright, so now that we understand a little bit more about this deck, Abrade seems quite poor. I think I might want Go Blanks. Just because they're attempting to cast 7 and 8 mana cards. Maybe I want Bloodchief's Thirst. I can get rid of that Garruk. I don't know that I fear that Garruk that much. You know, let's play 1 Go Blank, 1 Duress. So this is potentially one of those games where I'm going to want to make a turn 3 Key to the Archive. Let's see what happens on their turn 3. So I'm giving up the ability to play a Saw It Coming on turn 3. Should I just jam? Or be patient? I think I'm going to be patient. I don't really want them to resolve that Garruk on their 4th turn. And also the fact that they're playing blue, they might have cards that can counter Key to the Archive or destroy it. I mean, they had that Sawblade Slinger, so they could definitely potentially destroy it. Sure. It doesn't really seem like a particularly effective card against my deck, to be honest. You want to absorb the energy of my key. Sure. So now if they have a Lantern of the Lost in their hand, it's free. It's a pretty good price to pay for a Lantern of the Lost. Definitely need to kill that thing. I can't even imagine what their deck would do to me if I left that in play. Here's where having the one basic in your deck pays off. So, Witness the Future targets a player in addition to targeting the cards in the graveyard, so it can't be fizzled by Lantern of the Lost, which is pretty nice. I think I should just play Imrith. They haven't demonstrated really any way to interact with Imrith. I guess that's not true. They did have the Tarrasque. They could be building up to cast the Tarrasque. Come on, something good. I've gotten my answer to the Tarrasque. I am set now. I think this match, obviously this is a pretty weird deck my opponent's playing, but I think that this is an example of why it's important to have a diversity of removal. Like having the one Soul Shatter instead of having 3 Brittle Blasts, this one Soul Shatter is just the best card against my opponent's deck. So it's something to look for when, you know, I'm playing cards that give me a choice about what card to keep in my hand. Something to choose to target when I'm recycling spells with Witness the Future like I did in the previous game. Now what? They seem like they're trying to interact with this card. Quandrix Command. Okay. There's not really a lot of reason to give them a window where they could do something through my side coming. Aren't their creatures big enough on their own? Do they really need unnatural growth to make the Tarrasque even bigger? I haven't been making it a priority to cast this Discover the Formula because I think it's pretty likely the last card in their hand is Test of Talents. It's obviously something that is an interactive spell they haven't felt like they had an opportunity to cast. Let's see if it's Test of Talents. I'm not going to protect my Discover the Formula from Test of Talents with the Sod coming. What was it? What do you got? A Null and Hunter's Mark. Never in a billion years would I have guessed either of those two cards. Alright. So this is probably a Sanguine Brushstroke style deck. Might just be a mono black deck. It's definitely an eye twitch deck. Wow, would Brittle Blast be good? Still have not found a source of black mana. Neither one of these black cards are particularly interesting to cast. I guess if I really need black mana, I can get it from this treasure. As long as they don't play a Wedding Anniversary anytime soon, I think I'm in fine shape. A Fell Stinger. This I actually should kill. Really hurts to give up my treasure. But the Fell Stinger would draw them 2 cards, and it would allow them to exploit an Eye Twitch. They could still exploit an Eye Twitch, but they're not going to get to draw the 2 cards because the Fell Stinger is not in play. There's something weird about how exploit is worded, that it works fine if you're exploiting away the creature to itself, but it does not work if the creature's dead and you exploited a different creature. Which I don't really understand why that's how it works, but that is how it works. Alright, we're going to let day turn to night. Gain some life back, which is nice. Soul Shatter is pretty useless, but it's more useful than a second copy of the Celestus. Obviously, one drawback with Soul Shatter is you don't always get to kill what you want. If my removal spell could kill the Hive of the Eye Tyrant here, I still probably wouldn't even play it, but I can't even kill the Hive of the Eye Tyrant. I would just make them sack an Eye Twitch, which is obviously not something that's really going to help me improve my situation at all. Fortunately, I can spend my mana on Discover the Formula, which absolutely will help my situation improve. So I could discover again and play a Massacre on 1. Of course, if I do that, they're just going to get Mascot Exhibition, and then I don't have a Meathook Massacre to sweep the board anymore. So let's just pass the turn. I can play Cleaved Parasitic Grasp on the Hive of the Eye Tyrant, plus Discover the Formula this turn. I think I'll just take the hit rather than Parasitic Grasp and Eye Twitch right away. What do they have in their hand that they don't want to learn? They want a treasure. Something seems wrong about what the opponent's got going on. All right, now I guess I can just Massacre for 1. Although I don't have access to enough black mana to also kill the Hive of the Eye Tyrant, but I don't really need to be able to kill it if they attack with it. This turn I'm going to go up to 7 life, and then I'm going to play a second spell, so I'll be going up to 8 life. Because night will turn to day. Pest Summoning and Mascot Exhibition. Not particularly surprising. Would I like to witness the future? Yeah, I think Witness the Future is probably better than Expressive Iteration at this point. Could go either way. That's a pretty good card. Sure, I don't need to counter that. So from this point, it's probably impossible for them to win. It's just a matter of playing it out. Need to be a little bit careful that the Hive of the Eye Tyrant doesn't get to eat my Witness the Futures. Sorin the Mirthless. Let's see what we got. That will stop you, Sorin the Mirthless. Wow, they didn't even want to see what more was to come. So against this deck, I hadn't thought a ton about how I would board against this deck. The go blanks are the thing that's scary, because they can break up the Witness the Future loop. I think I probably want Meathook Massacre. Definitely don't want Abrade. I think I want Soul Shatter. Parasitic Grasp isn't the worst. Maybe I do want Soul Shatter. They did have Sorin in their main deck. A little bit soft to Sorin. Not that soft to it. It's pretty bad against Burn Down the House. And obviously you can hit it with Brittle Blast. I like having a couple Parasitic Grasps in my deck because it can take out the Vampire, the Welcoming Vampire. It can take out the Hive of the Eye Tyrant. The question is, do I want Infernal Grasp or do I want Soul Shatter? I think I want Soul Shatter, maybe. I think this should be a generally really strong matchup for my deck. Their deck just isn't very fast, and this deck just has ridiculous late game with all the Discover the Formulas and Magma Opuses. And one of the strengths of their deck is that they just have good removal for pretty much any kind of permanent, and I just don't offer a lot of permanents for them to remove. Could be in trouble if they have a Sorin this turn. Yeah, all right. What do you got, opponent? Torment of Scarabs. Ugh. I guess I should counter it. We're so early on in the game. I don't think I'm at the point where that's a card I can just fight through and ignore. I played the red land there over the black land because my plan is to just play Test of Talents and Magma Opus. And make the treasure off of Magma Opus this turn. I think that the way this game is going, I want to discover the formula as fast as possible. Hopefully, the Discover will find me a burn down the house. Sure. Sure. Should I wait one more turn? Yeah, I think it's fine to wait one more turn. If I wait one more turn, I'll be able to play the burn down in the house for 4 and potentially do something else with my turn. And I'm also guaranteed to get to resolve the Discover. Where if they had like double Go Blank in their hand and I played burn down the house, I don't get to resolve Discover. It's pretty ugly for me. Certainly one of these can go, and probably this can go as well. A little bit concerned about the side of the Eye Tyrant they have in their hand. Man, I would love to cast Expressive Iteration this turn, but if I don't hit a red land in my top 3 cards, it's really, really awful for me. Of course, what's the plan if they just go and get Mascot Exhibition? Guess they would need a land. They have a tap land. I think I have to play Burn Down the House this turn. They don't even need a land because they can get a treasure from Shambling Ghast. I'm just going to hope that they don't get Mascot Exhibition, or if they do get it, that find an answer for it. Wait. Oh, they don't learn. It wasn't an Eye Twitch. It was a Cursebound Witch, so that they can't get Mascot Exhibition. They got a Cauldron Familiar. Guess I'm taking this hit down to 5. All of the Parasitic Grasps have been exiled from my deck, so I need to really protect my life total more. Help, I'm being overrun by Hive of the Eye Tyrants. Okay. 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 These are all things that my opponent's allowed to do to me. Are we to the point where I turn things around now? Do I want to attack or do I want to just Celestus? I think I should Celestus. This gives me 2 life and 2 loots. Not that the cards in my hand are bad, but they're certainly both a lot worse than Discover the Formula. They're also certainly both a lot worse than that one. Holy cow, it's an eye twitch. Are any of my Witness the Futures exiled? No. I'm going to play Meathook Massacre on my turn. I'm literally just playing this to draw 2 cards and deal eliminative damage. I don't think the 4/4 is important at all. Next turn I'll start attacking with Hall of Storm Giants. I probably missed an opportunity to foretell the... Saw it coming last turn. Not that it would have been... It's not going to help me with the casting cost at all, but it would be nice to just not have it in my hand because they're playing with Duress. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. This way they'll still get a spell from the Duress, but it won't be the Sod coming. Oh, also it does reduce the casting cost of the Sod coming to 1 blue. Is it time to Soul Shatter? Let's shatter their dreams of having a Shambling Ghast. No Shambling Ghast for you, opponent. What do they have in their hand? Might just be like another Rite of Oblivion, maybe? Alright, we're never going to know. Well, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll probably continue to refine this deck and maybe make another video on it. And we'll maybe get to see it against some of the other top tier decks in a future video. Thanks for watching.